I was first introduced to the deaf world by Bobby Devine. He told me all about the local deaf community. I remember that so well. No, no. He asked me if I received contact, and I told him that I hadn't. So he helped me and arranged for it to be posted to my house. Contact was a magazine with deaf news. It contained chat articles, deaf parent stories, sign language classes for children, etc. So I had a job and a car, and life was going along when someone told me about the deaf clubs, that there was one in Omagh and one in Derry. So I went along to the Omagh Deaf Club. It was big. There was a good crowd there. What age were you? I was about 19 or 20. It's a long time ago now, as I'm nearly 60. The organiser was the mother of a deaf man, James Corey. Oh, Florence, yes. I remember being told it was a big club, and it was. This was the first time I was exposed to ISL, which confused me, as I wrongly thought there was only one sign language used here. The ISL deaf people had went to school in Dublin, but I wasn't aware of that. It took a while initially reading the ISL signs, but it wasn't long before I had acquired it from chatting at the deaf club every Friday night. Soon I was as fluent in ISL as I was in my first language, BSL. So I had a lot of cleaning to do. Tidying the bedrooms, making the beds. Weekdays and weekends were the same, and I never got to go home. Good question. I remember going to the Monday Club with my father at KC Church, and they were all signing BSL there, which was strange. They were curious about me and where I was from. I told them I'd been to school at Dublin. Some of them got quite derogatory about Dublin to me, but it wasn't my fault. I'd been sent to school there by my parents. I felt quite insulted by this. Then in time, I picked up bits and pieces of BSL. Some deaf there helped me. At home we used our own system of communication. Every month there was a mass, a Catholic mass, organised by the nuns. And I remember going there, and there was a coach of ISL deaf people. They had went to the same school as me, St Mary's. It was great. There were so many of them, and I was chatting away to them in my ISL language. It was so different to the local deaf club where I was struggling with the language. Now clubs are dwindling away and the monthly mass is no more. I remember when I first went to the deaf club. It was all new to me. I was in awe of everything. I was young and shy. In the deaf club, yes, it was Northwest Deaf Association, NWDA. I remember what the building looked like. I remember the room we used. I met all the deaf members. I felt so happy. There was such a good crowd. I learned so much. It was lovely. We owe a huge debt of thanks to Noel McCluskey. He was the founder of the club. It was to bring deaf people together. Then we moved to Glenbrook. Did he move to Portadown? Yeah, but I'm talking about the club. It was St Patrick's first. The first dinner dance was in Donegal. Oh, I remember that. It was fabulous. Yes, we had 150 deaf people. There were others invited too, including the bishops. Both the Protestant and the Catholic bishops attended, and the deaf group was cross-community. It was as if deaf people could change the political world and have peace. Such nostalgia. I remember that. As I said, the communication barrier was fierce, but I was fortunate to have my deaf friends, Noel and Harry, and I remember we used to go out at the weekends. There was no deaf club at that time, so we used to set off at the weekends in the car. I really enjoyed it. It was great. I worked all week and looked forward to the weekends with them. Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday rest up for going back to work. After some time, the deaf club was set up and things really improved. When was that? 1979. I'd left school in 1974. And up until then, we just had our weekends out and about. Interesting, were you the same? Yes, I was working in Dungannon. I worked there for 20 odd years. And I enjoyed every minute of it. How did you get involved at the deaf club? I was told by a deaf person there was a club in Derry. So I went along by myself. It was on Friday nights. I met many people there. It was good. How I got involved. So I went to work and came home. I knew some deaf people from my school were living around my area, but I was a home bird. Then a deaf person visited my house and told me about the deaf club. I hadn't known anything about it, so they invited me to go along with them. It was St. Joseph's Deaf Club on the Falls Road, Bread Street. So we went there, and some of the adults recognised me from when I was a young boy. They welcomed me with open arms, and once the introductions were over, we played some games. I remember playing drafts. It was great, playing and chatting. The club was every Friday night. The committee organised some competitions with the games. There were drafts, table tennis, cards, etc. I used to study the older ones playing the cards, and I learned the game. And then I decided I would chance it. I was quite nervous as there was money at stake. But I was lucky, and I won. And I was able to get myself some new clothes. And when I was asked at home about this, of course I made up some excuses. Clever. Every Friday night at the deaf club, we'd be socializing away up until about 10 o'clock. And then we would head over to the pub. And we'd stay there chatting until about 1 or 2 in the morning. They were wonderful times. Some had cars, which was great for whenever it was cold. Then I lived in Castledurg, which was quite far away. It was about 50 miles. But I wouldn't miss a Friday night because it was my relief from isolation. It was a wonderful time. I really enjoyed it. I remember meeting James Burke, which was very different from me, as he signed using BSL. We used to enjoy going out at the weekends. We would go for a drink and play pool. I loved pool. I really enjoyed myself. At St. Joseph's, someone told me about another club. They said it was good. They played pool, darts, table tennis, football, the whole gambit. I was amazed. At St. Joseph's, it was an indoor club, but the other place was outdoor as well. Anyway, I went and thought they would be using ISL, but they were signing in BSL. I was lost. I know ISL has a female dialect, but I didn't know what they were saying. Learning a new language was challenging firstly. I learned the alphabet, and after some time I picked it up well. It's great being able to communicate in both languages. However, ISL is my native language. It's the same for me. I'm ISL first and foremost. But I remember meeting a new boy who used BSL. It was quite testing trying to pick BSL up, but eventually I did, and it's rich to know both. In terms of age, you started after you left school at 19, but I first went to the Deaf Club when I was about 12 or 13. I was very fortunate as the older deaf people were a mine of information, passing on stories and educating me on the ways of the world. Both languages were used there. At Oma Club sometimes there were talks to a mix of ISL and BSL deaf people, and I recall a Protestant interpreter being there, with a deaf relay interpreter. The philosophy of the time was BSL was for Protestants and ISL was for Catholics. That was the first time I saw a deaf relay interpretation. Now I am a relay interpreter, having gained level 6 in BSL and ISL. Looking back, we were very lucky to live in a bilingual community, as we were immersed in a unique culture. It has to be said sometimes processing between two languages can be exhausting. How did you first meet deaf people when you left school? So, I knew a deaf person quite well, and we arranged to go swimming in Limavady. It was great. We went swimming and had a chat. It was a lovely time. Was there a deaf club? Yes, NWDA. At that club for the first time was very daunting for me. I didn't know anyone there, and there was a mixture of both languages being used. When I was small at NWDA, I couldn't understand what they were saying, as I didn't know sign language. I just looked around mystified at what I was saying. I couldn't understand anything. I remember both of you when you were young at Bishop Street. Yes, Bishop Street. Oh, I was completely lost then. But when I left school, going to the deaf club helped me to retain my sign language. In Oma we had a deaf club. I grew up going there from the age of 4 or 5. It was every Friday. Back then there were some special times, for example at Christmas and Halloween. Lovely. There were dinner dances attended by all the deaf community in Northern Ireland. Delightful memories. After I finished my training course, my mother got in touch with the social worker, and they came out and told us there was a deaf club in Derry. I inquired when it was held and they told me it was on a Friday night. So, my father offered to give me a lift because at that time I couldn't drive. I was about 18 or 19. So we went to the NWDA. It was in a hut in the grounds of the chapel. They were all older than me, which was very overwhelming. My father waited for me in the pub, and then when it was time to go home, he collected me. He took me every Friday. They knew it was important for me to have deaf people. Then in time I learned to drive. What age did you pass your test? I was 19. I picked it up quickly. I was able to offer some deaf people who lived near me a lift, which was good for me to have company late at night, especially with the troubles and the army checkpoints. Being asked for your licence and such and trying to communicate in the dark was quite scary. I was lucky I wasn't exposed to that. I was young and at home with my family, thankfully. The Deaf Club became my second home, with the deaf members being my other family. Like you, we had big events on, where all the deaf came together for dinner dances, etc., and we all mixed together. Gorgeous memories. I remember me and my husband had just got married, and we went to the old Deaf Club in Derry. Oh, the style of the time we had. It was fantastic, chatting in sign language and meeting deaf people. It was so interesting. I thought lip reading was good, but the sign language was so relaxing and interesting. What about you? I remember meeting everyone at the Deaf Club. Some were older. The age range varied. I learned so much. It was so interesting. After the Deaf Club on a Friday night, we used to go to the pub and continued chatting into the wee hours. We had such a bond. The atmosphere was amazing. Things have changed a lot now though. I found out about a deaf club in Belfast on the Falls Road. I told my daddy and he questioned me about where it was. And I told him it was in Bread Street. So he gave me directions. Anyway, I decided to go and I caught the bus. On the bus, I showed the inspector the note I had with the address on it. The bus in time stopped and he ushered me forward and pointed out Bread Street. I walked over and I remember thinking to myself, this is a housing area. I looked all around, trying to see something that looked remotely like a deaf club. At first, I went to the wrong door, and they told me next door. Two deaf men appeared in the doorway. They were older than me. We went in, and gosh, they were all past pupils from my school, Cabra. The excitement that night was electric. Catching up, it was miraculous. They asked if I could play football, which I could. Oh, the memories of that experience are still magical to this day. Every Sunday at the Deaf Club. When I left school, I was estranged from my deaf peers. I was in the hearing world. In my heart I had my deaf identity, and I went to deaf events like dinner dances. The Troubles were ongoing at that time in Northern Ireland. I hardly ever went to the Deaf Club, but I liked dinner dances and mixed with the others there. There were two deaf who lived near my home, and I would visit them the odd time for a cup of tea and a chat. There were dinner dances for deaf people in places like Dublin and other areas where deaf people could socialise to relieve their isolation. It was so important to have this support network. It was a lifeline. Some deaf people were deprived of this because their parents didn't let them go. The Deaf Club was our sanctuary. It was so interesting. And then I fell in love and got married. My wife was from Newry. We met in Belfast at a Christmas party. I fancied her straight away and wasn't long in asking for her address. Soon enough after that, I was catching the bus to Newry. I got off the bus and asked for directions to her house. I took off up the hill. I was on cloud 9. I stopped with a man smoking a pipe and asked him where the house was. And he led me to the house. It was her father. Her mammy thought I was a lovely boy. We were in the kitchen and they heard a cup smashing. She had dropped it with nervousness. Her mum thought it was me that had broken it. After school, where I lived, there was no deaf club. So I used to visit 3 of my deaf friends for catch-ups. One was called McKernan. We shared stories and visited each other all the time. Then I got married, and obviously that all came to an end. There was an old deaf man, and he helped me find the nearest deaf club. So myself and my sister went along with him. It was in Belfast. I went in and took it all in. There was a range of deaf people there, and that was the start of it. I used to go regularly every Sunday. We've been together ever since. In fact, how long? 53 years. He's a great man. I've always liked him. Thank you.